I sat motionless, as if paralyzed, while my wife of 25 years explained why she was serving me with divorce papers. I could hear only half of what she was saying. "Gary, are you listening to me? You look like you're in a daze. Pay attention. Okay, this is important. I'm sorry I was distracted for a moment. What were you talking about? The terms are simple. There is nothing to dispute. I'm not asking for anything. Do you hear that? Absolutely nothing. You keep the house, the cars, and all the money in the bank. If you sign this, it's all over in 3 months." I didn't know what to say. Marcy and I had been married since high school. We raised 2 beautiful twin daughters. Cindy and Sandy went to Columbia University to study international banking. We had a nice house in the suburbs, and we both drove Volvos. Marcy had her own credit cards and cell phone. I never denied her anything. I never cheated on her. I never verbally or physically abused her. She never showed that she was unhappy or complained about anything. There was no way I could have prepared myself for this. Maybe that was the problem, I said later. I wasn't paying attention. I understand the mechanics of divorce, Marcy, but can you tell me why? It's probably too late to do anything about it, but I'd like to know why. Marcy sort of collapsed into the kitchen chair. It was obvious she didn't want to discuss the reasons, and she hoped I would just sign the papers and let her go. Just tell me briefly, Marcy, what the hell did I do wrong? You didn't do anything wrong, Gary. You were the perfect husband. Sometimes I hoped you'd screw up so I'd have an excuse to leave, but you never did. You were great at raising the kids and getting them through college. You always gave me everything I wanted, even when I was unreasonable. You bought me a beautiful house. My parents love you. Don't ever think you did anything wrong because you didn't. She looked about 45. Her hair was light brown, glossy in the sunlight, and she kept herself fit. On weekdays, she looked like a Land's End catalog girl, but when she wanted to be glamorous, she could be breathtaking. She was as perfect as she claimed. I just couldn't figure out what was behind this. I'm sorry. It doesn't make sense. There has to be a reason. You can't just say it's okay and then walk away. There has to be a reason, Marcy. I'm trying to do this in a way that doesn't hurt your feelings or make me look bad. Why don't we just leave it at that? No, Gary, I found someone else. He's a real estate developer. He has a beautiful apartment overlooking the river and a black Mercedes. He's handsome, rich, and madly in love with me. You were and still are a grocery clerk at the supermarket. I am not demeaning your job. You have always taken care of us and always earned enough to keep the family comfortable. However, you will always be a grocery clerk. I wanted more than that. I couldn't imagine you would do that for me. You were always happy with what you were doing. I didn't see you trying to improve it. It was painful. I was the manager of the grocery department, and she still thought of me as a clerk. When I had a chance to advance my career and move out of town, I turned it down to keep my family together. And now look how I was rewarded. Does this rich, good-looking guy have a name? Clayton Manning. He's the president of Keystone Development Company. How long have you known him? 6 months? You slept with him? Marcy sat up straight. Her eyes darted around the room, then finally met mine. Yes. I was trying to avoid the subject, but since you insist, yes. You were still married. Yes. I cheated on you. I was an adulteress. Are you happy now? I sat for a while, then reached over, took the divorce papers, signed in 3 places, initialed 2, and handed them back to her across the table. I think he's better than I am. Sorry to disappoint you. I got up, and as I was leaving the room, Marcy screamed, "Hell no! That's not the reason. He wasn't better than you, just different. Don't you dare walk away believing that, Gary. Don't you dare!" By then, I was out the door. I was so absorbed in my work and hobbies that I hadn't noticed Marcy gradually moving her things out of the house. By the time she handed me the papers, she'd moved most of her clothes and personal belongings into Clayton's apartment. She'd thoughtfully left all the wedding and family photos behind so I could enjoy them in her absence. When I got back to the house, she was gone. Her Volvo was still in the driveway, which I figured she wouldn't need anymore. She had left a power of attorney on the kitchen table to sell the house and car. I spent the rest of the night getting rid of the beer in the refrigerator. By then, I realized the job was done. There was no turning back, and I didn't want to. The next morning, I called work and took 3 months of overdue vacation. They were always nagging me to take time off, so there was no problem. I had plenty of vacation and sick leave. I quickly called the girls at school and briefly explained that we were breaking up, but refused to give them any other information. They wanted to call Marcy, but I didn't have her new number. I had 3 months to pull myself together and decide what I was going to do. I disconnected the landline, changed my cell number, and canceled the one Marcy had. The Volvo dealer gave me the low book value for her car. I called a high school friend, Terry Davis, now a real estate broker. He agreed to sell the house off-market at a low price with a quick settlement. To be sure, I canceled all my credit cards and opened new bank accounts. I cashed in some life insurance policies. It was time to put the house in order. I went through the house and collected everything that could possibly belong to my wife. There was enough stuff to fill 3 trash bags. I packed the girls' personal belongings into boxes and put them in the closet by the garage. I spent 3 hours sorting through family photos. I put all of the girls' pictures in a box for them. All the pictures of Marcy went in the trash. It was stupid. I know that, but I didn't care. The main problem I faced was a lack of direction. I had no idea what I would do after 3 months. Would I stay here or leave? Would I keep working or find something new? I had 2 hobbies. I collected coins, mostly large cents with Indian heads. They were easy to collect, readily available, and I bought and sold them on eBay. My second passion was geocaching. It got me outdoors and gave me exercise. Marcy hated the activity: ticks, poison ivy, and the walking. I didn't see how I could make a living doing either one. When I wasn't busy with my hobbies, I read the Wall Street Journal. Cindy and Sandy gave me a subscription every Christmas. I had no interest in stocks and bonds, but I read everything about farm commodities. I knew more about sugar, wheat, and corn than most market analysts. Of course, it was just a hobby. I had no money invested in any of it. I researched everything I could about Keystone Development and Clayton Manning. Terry helped too. He got more information than I could and cross-checked it with a friend at a local commercial bank. I couldn't wait to see what he came up with. It had been 6 weeks, and in all that time I hadn't seen or heard from Marcy. The girls called every week, but their mother did not. I had a feeling they were on my side, but Marcy was their mother, so they had to be supportive to some degree. I had a few yard sales and unloaded a ton of stuff. I left enough furniture in the house to make it presentable for potential buyers. One Sunday, I found Marcy and Clayton's picture in the society section of the paper. They were at a political rally, drinking wine with local figures. They were smiling for the camera. A few more weeks passed, and Terry made an offer on the house. It was pretty low compared to the appraisal, but they wanted to close in 60 days, which would be perfect. I decided to get out of the house for a while. Hayes Mountain was one of the best places nearby for hiking and geocaching. The mountain had 3 government survey landmarks within a mile of each other as the crow flies, though it was twice that in hiking distance. Survey landmarks are reference points placed by government surveyors. They're usually metal rods driven into concrete. Finding them is a side game for serious geocachers. I planned to find all 3 that day. In addition to the GPS, I brought a metal detector. Finding rebar or metal in the woods isn't easy, and I needed every tool I had. Much of Hayes Mountain was part of the Madison Land Trust, nearly 2,000 acres. They were constantly looking to add land, but subdivisions and industrial parks ate up most vacant space. Next to the trust's parking lot was an orchard and farmhouse with a big "For Sale" sign. After parking, I walked to the fence by the orchard. An old man in overalls and a John Deere cap introduced himself as John Smurd. We joked about the price. He told me he'd give the land trust a discount, $600,000 instead of $1 million, if they could raise the money in 90 days. If they couldn't, he'd sell to a developer who already had the $1 million under lock and key. He mentioned a developer who called every week, and I thought, Keystone. The landmarks were within a mile of each other. The first 2 were easy. The last marker was older and harder to find. When I finally found it, I uncovered a small brick monument with a bronze plaque. I took a picture to post on the geocaching forum. As I stepped away, my metal detector beeped faintly. I put on my headset and scanned the area. About 10 feet south of the marker, the detector went strong. I probed carefully and found a small iron box wrapped in heavily oiled canvas. It was rusty on the surface, but sturdy. The lock was heavy bronze. Finds like that on public land are often treasures that should be turned over to the government or a historical agency. For some reason, that option didn't make sense to me that day. I put the box in my bag and headed home. All the way back, I imagined gold coins or Civil War documents. Back in the kitchen, I cleaned the table and studied the find. I didn't want to destroy the lock, but I couldn't figure out another way to open it. My bolt cutters made quick work of the task. Inside was another piece of oiled canvas. I carefully unwrapped it and found 12 large cents, old, oversized pennies. The newest date was 1814. The oldest was 1793. Despite their age, the dates were readable and there was no green corrosion. I had ignored large cents for years, thinking newer pennies were a better investment. But my grandfather had left me a thin book called The Quirks of the Penny. It had sat on a shelf for 30 years and gathered dust. That night it found a purpose. I sat up until dawn with a magnifying glass and my scanner, taking high-resolution photos of each coin. Every crack and scratch was visible. The condition of some coins was extraordinary. I slept until noon. I called work to check in. Phil Williams, one of the company executives, had asked about me, but they didn't know anything else. I had other concerns. A trip to the bank for a safe deposit box was necessary. After a few hours online, I realized my pennies were worth several $1,000,000. It wasn't just age. It was condition and rare varieties. Turning them into cash would be hard. There was no easy money laundering scheme for rare coins. While having breakfast at IHOP, I noticed another photo of Marcy and Clayton in the paper. They were at an art gallery opening. She wore a black cocktail dress and held a glass of champagne. They were smiling. Looking at that picture, the next step became clear. I called John Smurd and asked him to pause any decisions about the land for a few days. He seemed satisfied. I went to the land trust office and asked how to make a donation. They were eager to help. We were 4 weeks away from the final divorce. For some reason, that deadline felt important. I spent the next days researching coin dealers and auction houses. I wasn't looking for advertisements. I was looking for lawsuits and how dealers handled controversial sales. Eventually, I settled on Towers and Burns in New York City. They had the reputation and financial strength to handle a sensitive sale without too much publicity. I made an appointment for Monday. I also called the girls and asked them to keep Monday morning free so we could have lunch. Towers and Burns had a chic showroom of glass and light. I gave my name and was escorted to a less glamorous part of the building. "Welcome to New York, Mr. Simmons. I understand you have some interesting coins to show us. Is this your first time in the city?" James Towers asked. He looked older than his photo. He called for Maurice Cookson, an expert on early copper coins. "I have 12 special coins," I said. "I hope to sell 4 today, keep 1 for your consideration, and offer the rest later if things go well. I think 6 of these may be condition census pieces. I'd like your opinion." "Where did these coins come from?" James asked. "My grandfather left them to me. I found them in a box on the mountain." I laid 4 large, clear photographs of the coins on the table, obverse and reverse, enlarged 5 times. James and Maurice studied them carefully. Finally, James spoke. "What did you come up with for these 4? "A quick look at recent auctions leads me to believe they could fetch about $750,000 to $1 million for the lot," I said. I'd hoped for $1 million, but I wasn't unreasonable. Maurice, who really knew his pennies, nodded slowly. "I only want $800,000 for the lot," I said. "But it has to be treated specially." James leaned back and smiled. "I think we can handle it. How special are you talking about?" I had a letter from the land trust explaining how to donate land. I slid it across the table to James, along with the photographs of the coins. "Advertisement for John S.M.D.'s orchard," the man said. "I want you to buy this piece of land and donate it to the Madison Land Trust. The price is $600,000. You'll get a very nice tax deduction and become humanitarians. I'll take the rest of the money in cash." "Give us a moment, please," I replied. James and Maurice retreated to the other end of the room. After a few minutes, Maurice left and James returned to the table. "Do you have any coins with you?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "I also have a 5th coin that I'd like to keep with you." Mr. Cookson came back with a purple Crown Royal bag. This time, he spoke directly. "We're willing to honor your terms on the first part of the deal and hope you can honor ours on the second part." He then dumped the purple packet onto the table. It turned out to contain almost 100 different coins, mostly gold, but some silver as well. "The retail price of this collection," he said, "is around $300,000. For reasons we won't discuss, it's difficult for us to sell them. However, you won't have a problem. I understand you've sold coins on eBay before, correct? I simply nodded. These coins, inherited from your grandfather, should sell easily, Cookson continued. We'll both benefit, I assure you. You won't have any difficulties. He winked slightly. I thought about it for a while, then agreed. I handed the 4 pennies to Mr. Towers, and we all shook hands. Now, Mr. Simmons, Cookson said, tell us about this 5th coin. I held the photograph in my hand and looked at him. Name the highest-rated 1793 strawberry you've ever seen. I've never seen one, he said, but I think the highest score is fair 12. I rated this picture an 8, I replied, but I'm not a professional. He wasn't looking at the picture, he was watching my face. Both men leaned in, trying to see the photograph at the same time. Cookson smiled broadly. I could see the dollar signs in Towers' eyes. How much? He asked. Best offer, if you can figure out how to pay me. Would you like a cup of coffee, Mr. Simmons? Of course, I said. Black would be fine. They both left the room with the picture. A few minutes later, a young woman brought me a cup of coffee. Mr. Towers will be with you in a few minutes, she said. He has some phone calls to make. Will you be okay? I nodded and started drinking. 30 minutes passed before Towers returned, and this time, he wasn't alone. She walked in beside him. Dark eyes, raven hair, and an air of power. She looked no older than 30. Beautiful, elegant, and somehow familiar. Hello, she said smoothly. My name is Letitia Rothberg. Do you have a passport, Mr. Simmons? Yes, I replied cautiously. Good, she said. We'll be traveling to JFK shortly to set up a new offshore bank account for you. Do you have anything to give to Mr. Towers? I handed James the 1793 strawberry coin. He looked like a little boy at Christmas. Thank you, he said as he left the room. We had never agreed on a price, but I still had 7 coins Towers wanted. He agreed to hold the small bag until I returned. An hour later, Letitia and I were already sitting on a plane bound for the Cayman Islands. She hardly spoke. When we arrived at the airport, several photographers were waiting to take her picture. She looked slightly annoyed, yet smiled sweetly for the cameras. It was my first-class flight. And it ended far too soon. A bright yellow mini SUV was waiting for us at the terminal. Letitia didn't hesitate to pull her skirt up to her hips as she slid into the driver's seat. To my embarrassment, she caught me sneaking a glance at her tanned legs. She didn't seem offended. In fact, she seemed amused. 20 minutes later, we parked beneath a mid-sized condominium building. Letitia Rothberg, as it turned out, owned the entire building, but she lived on the top floor, her private apartment. Can I get you anything, Mr. Simmons? She asked. A beer would be nice, I replied. The sight of her walking away was as mesmerizing as her entrance at the airport. It wasn't in my nature to fawn over women, but Letitia Rothberg was different. We sat later on a small balcony overlooking the ocean. It was beautiful out there, the kind of view that made you forget time itself. But the wind was too strong for my taste. She looked over at me and smiled softly. You don't talk very much, Mr. Simmons. Surely you have a few questions. It struck me as odd that a woman of her class, rich, educated, powerful, was drinking beer from a bottle. I would have imagined her sipping champagne or martinis. I finally asked, So, why did we need to come here to open a bank account? She leaned back and answered calmly, It's simple, safe, secure, a good place to manage your money. I think it'll work well for you. It's just 1 coin, I said. Yes, she replied with a hint of mystery. But you have 7 more. I frowned slightly. That still seems excessive. To my surprise, she smiled, a slow, deliberate smile. Then she leaned closer and said, Can you accept this? I brought you here to be my sex slave for a few days. For a moment, I was stunned. Then I laughed. I knew it was nonsense, but the way she said it, playful, confident, made it funny. She had a sense of humor, looked incredible, and was rich beyond reason. What more could a man dream of? If only I were 10 years younger, I said. It's no good teasing an old man, she joked back. We both laughed lightly at the absurdity of it all. Come on, Mr. Simmons, she said, standing up. Let's go get some fresh lobsters for dinner. The restaurant was amazing. Fresh seafood, candlelight, the sound of waves outside. The wine, though, not so much. "What's wrong with the wine, Mr. Simmons?" she asked. I sighed. "Was I that obvious?" "I'm sorry. It's just, when I was 18, I got drunk on cheap white wine once. Haven't been able to stand it since. Every time I smell it, I feel sick," she laughed softly. "No problem." 5 minutes later, we each had a cold beer instead. Oddly enough, the conversation stayed light, pleasant. At the end of dinner, she leaned in slightly. "Tell me about yourself," she said. "Are you married? Children? What do you do for a living?" I hesitated. "That's a lot of questions," I said with a smile. "I have 2 daughters, both at Columbia University, studying something about international banking. I just pay the tuition." "That's interesting," she said. "I have a master's degree from Columbia. I even guest lecture there. I might have met your daughters." "Actually," I said, "I had lunch with them this morning before my flight." She nodded thoughtfully. "You must have gotten married young since your daughters are in college." Her words felt oddly comforting. I found myself relaxing more around her. Maybe it was the ocean breeze, or maybe it was her charm, but I felt like talking. "I'm estranged from my wife," I admitted. "She left me for some rich wheeler dealer. Builds shopping centers, big offices, that kind of thing. She said she needed more excitement. The divorce will be final in about 4 weeks." "That's a stupid reason to leave a good marriage," Letitia said sharply. "Yeah," I sighed. "I guess everything was fine until she met him. She was never happy with my job. I had chances to advance, but she didn't want to move. I stayed for her. What do you do?" she asked curiously. There was a pause. I felt my face heat up slightly. "I manage a grocery store," I said quietly. She smiled gently. "That's not important. We can talk about it later." "No," I said. "It's okay. I'm not ashamed. It's just not the kind of job that impresses women like you." Her eyes softened, but before I could say more, the waiter brought coffee. "Mr. Simmons," she said after a moment, "I believe first impressions are very important. So tell me, what's your first impression of me?" The question caught me off guard. If I told her the truth, I might push her away. If I flattered her, she'd know I was lying. After a pause, I said, "In short, you're beautiful, intelligent, educated, confident." She tilted her head, eyes fixed on mine, and smiled faintly. "I was hoping for candor," she said. "I didn't want to ruin the evening," I replied softly. "Maybe that's why your wife left you," she said suddenly. "You tried too hard to please her? If you hadn't, maybe your marriage would have been stronger." It stung, but she wasn't entirely wrong. "Miss Rothberg," I said slowly, "you are cunning and manipulative. You use your beauty and charm to get what you want. You're used to having your way. You play with men, but you're afraid of commitment. Still, I think you'd make a wonderful mother." She stared at me for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, she smiled. "Do you really think I'd be a good mother?" she asked quietly. The mood changed completely. The tension faded. During the drive back to the condo, things were pleasant again. She'd wanted the truth, and I gave it to her. The fact that she accepted it made me respect her even more. We ended the evening at a grand cocktail party. Everyone there seemed to know Letitia. Investors, bankers, diplomats. She was the center of attention, radiant and confident. I stayed in the background, sipping my drink, just watching her. Every now and then, she'd glance back to make sure I was okay. Later that night, she took my hand and led me out quietly, away from the noise and flashing cameras. "What was that for?" I asked. She smiled. "You were disappearing again. The next morning, we flew back to New York. Photographers were waiting at the terminal, shouting her name. A courier handed me a small package, the rest of my coins from Towers and Burns. Letitia and I said our goodbyes in silence. I wanted to say more, but she only smiled and whispered, "Take care of yourself, Gary." Then she was gone. Part 5, the ending back home, life moved on. The divorce went smoothly. The house sold without trouble. I accepted a job offer at the company's main office in New York. And when I opened that little package of coins, everything changed again. I listed the collection online one by one. The bids skyrocketed. Every penny sold. And just like that, My PayPal account and my offshore one grew beyond imagination. For the first time in my life, I was free. A week later, I met with John Smurd for lunch. He smiled, shaking his head. "Gary, you always land on your feet," he said, handing me an envelope. Inside were the deeds to 5 acres of land just outside town. "A gift," he said. "From my wife and me." I sat back, staring at the papers. 5 acres. A new beginning. As I left the restaurant, I looked up at the sky and smiled. From a handful of coins to $4 million. From heartbreak and betrayal to freedom. And something close to peace. I don't know whatever happened to Letitia Rothberg. But sometimes, when I check my bank balance or read about her in the financial papers, I smile because maybe, just maybe, she was the best investment I ever made.